Hello, my name is Jeff Rolka. I want to thank you for checking out my video. This is Community Questions 8. Quickly becoming one of my favorite segments that I do here on YouTube. And this is where, in the Community tab, I throw up the old, hey, if you want to ask a question, now is a good time. And then, generally speaking, people write their questions, and then I answer them. That's what we're doing here. So thank you very much for your questions. I really look forward to this. It's exciting to think about singing and how to sculpt these answers in a way that hopefully you understand, makes sense to you, and can help you. And I am reasonably certain the others that are out there that are asking themselves the same thing. So I'm not really going to go on for much longer here. I do want to dive in. I want to thank you if you've chosen to subscribe. I appreciate it. I want to keep on mentioning, if you were on my newsletter over at jeffrolka.com, so generally speaking, people would go to jeffrolka.com. They want to try out my online method. It's free. You just have to sign up for the email list. And that would then give you the passwords. And when I deleted that email list accidentally, that was bad. But you can just go back and re-sign up. The old password still works, so if you signed up before, you can still use the method. It's still there. Everything is fine. I just deleted all of those emails, which means you will no longer be receiving my monthly newsletter, where I tend to expound upon topics that I cover here on YouTube more in depth. So like in October, which just came out, I talked at great length about breathing for singing, and particularly breath management at the higher ranges of our voices. So if you want to get in on those, jeffrolka.com. I'll try to remember to put a link on the screen and you can sign up. Right. I recently, like 3 weeks ago, realized that I was capable of hitting whistle notes, but it has been very difficult for me to reach and sustain these notes when I am doing my vocal training. So there's actually there's a clue here to the training for this that they have alluded to in their question, which is really kind of cool. So keep in mind, they use the word sustain there. Do my vocal training. However, after a long rest or before warming up, I can glide, another clue, in the sixth octave without a problem. Is there any exercise for me to work on these notes so I can be able to connect this register with my lower falsetto and the rest of my register? Thank you. Yeah. First and foremost, the most effective aspect of your training to access these ranges will be not immediately in sustain. So I would avoid like real sostenuto or real sustained passages, at least initially. As you develop the connection to the remainder of your overall range, your tessitura, as that connection gets more and more consistent, then you can start to work in more elongated exercises where you have more sustain, where you're sustaining pitches or singing more lines that have longer or like larger note values to them. You will find so in cultivating that release, faster moving passages can typically be helpful, but not too fast either, because in that range of your voice, you have to cultivate this release and cultivate a sort of detachment, but you also have to cultivate the aural skills to really hear and anticipate where those pitches are. So the Rossini scale in either its half or full format can be very, very helpful. Also, repetitive exercises of a tenth can be really, really helpful here too. So what I mean by that is the Rossini scale generally is this one. That gets used almost in all branches of vocal pedagogy. But you can also use one that's only an octave. So you can do that, and then as you get better and better at it, and notice I'm demonstrating these exercises neither too fast nor too slow. An even pace here will be advantageous. Additionally, I mentioned exercises. I don't even know what that would be. Exercise. That would be like an exercise for an ox, which would be kind of interesting. But I digress. Exercises of a tenth, repeating that octave and tenth there. So what that would sound like. That would be advantageous too. Again, neither too fast nor too slow. I would highly recommend that you consider carefully the repertoire and the ranges that are required of you for the repertoire that you're singing. In other words, cultivate the vocalizations as much as possible. And perhaps this is more moving forward with the exercises. Cultivate the exercises, the vocalizations that you're doing, so that they suit the repertoire that you are singing. In other words, you've got a song where the melody is kind of, doing its thing. And then all of a sudden, it skips way up and you're way off into this whistle range of your voice. Then work that into a vocalization, create a vocalization so that you are specifically addressing what is required of you from the repertoire. The exercises that I showed you initially, the 1 octave Rossini scale, the one that goes up to the 5th above, and then the one that's the 10th. Those are more general exercises just to develop that connection between the registers of your voice. Right. Just a comment. I love your work. Thanks is all I have to say, Jeffy. You are a blessing in my life. Thank you for that. You are most welcome. Hi, Jeff. I've been using your videos every day for a year now. I've changed my routine up several times, and I've noticed so much improvement from the past year. Excellent, brilliant. I personally start with breathing exercises and then move on to vocalization. I was wondering if you have any advice to improve my voice in ways other than exercises. I probably don't, well, first of all, thanks. That's a really great question. I probably don't address this quite as much as I ought to in the videos on YouTube. Very simply, bridge the gap between the vocalizations and your repertoire. So if you're singing a song, sing through the song with vowels. Remove the consonants and only use vowels, or do just a single vowel sound throughout the melody of your song. That would be one way of really bridging the gap between vocalization and repertoire. And so those aren't specifically exercises. You're working on repertoire, and yet we're kind of doing a vocalization within the song. That would be one way that you could really work with your voice without, strictly speaking, just doing an exercise. There is, of course, a wider swath that we could look at, including listening, music theory, reading music, harmonic, melodic analysis. All of those things would also be extremely advantageous for your overall musical development, the development of your musicianship, and will help your voice in the long run too. Aural skills. To a certain degree, our vocalizations are part of that, but a deliberate emphasis on aural skills. So specifically, do, re, mi, fa, sol, fa, mi, re, do, solfege practice is the practice of aural skills. That will have a dramatic impact on your musicianship and on your singing voice, and I think would be quite advantageous. Hi, Jeff. Love the material. Thank you. Reckon we could get some more falsetto videos at some point. Would be massively appreciated. Absolutely. Absolutely. There's so many different kinds of videos that I want to do, and I haven't done a set of warm-up videos that specifically go into that range in quite some time. So I'm happy to get that on the docket. I would love to be able to go to a twice a week release schedule with the videos. I just haven't yet been able to manage it from a time management perspective. So, but thank you for that. I'll happily get some falsetto videos out there. Could I become a singer if I practice singing with devotion for 3 to 4 years? Edit. Does the heart mean a yes to my answer or question mark, question mark? Thank you for that. The hearts, when I click on the heart in the community questions tab, that's just to let you know that I've seen your question and I'm going to be addressing it in the video. Yeah, that's why I clicked that, just to let you know, hey, I've seen you, and I'm gonna get to, pardon me, I'm gonna get to that. The 3 to 4 year thing is an interesting question. In a way, I would say I don't know. Basically, I think that's the surest answer I have is I just don't know. It depends on what you mean by devotion. It depends on the quality of practice. How attentive are you being to your voice? How attentive are you to your practice? What do you already know? If you already are an accomplished musician of some, like an accomplished pianist or guitarist, it might not take you 3 or 4 years. Then again, it might take you 8 or 10 years, depending on what it is you're trying to do. If, for example, all you want to do, and I don't mean all you want to do in a diminutive fashion, but if, let's say, the repertoire that you wish to sing does not exceed the secondo passaggio for your voice, then it might not take you 3 to 4 years. Then again, if you want a far more expansive range with far more dynamic control, variety, and variability, then it might take much longer, or it might not. Individual differences really come into play quite a lot. How you hear your voice, how you perceive the internal geography, like what awarenesses do you have around your voice? What can you sense? What sort of awareness do you have around the function of your voice already? That will have a great impact on your progress. So yeah, it's really hard to answer that question. I have, in my experience, in the years that I have been teaching, I have worked with people that have spent many years and really only gone a little bit further ahead in terms of their overall vocal abilities. And then I have worked with others who, through hard work, very attentive practice, and an internal awareness of how everything operates, have made incredible strides in remarkably short periods of time. Certainly, I hope that you're able to achieve your goals in rapid succession and get to that. But honestly, without knowing you and working with your voice, I just cannot say for sure, because I haven't heard you and I don't know you. Hope that helps anyway. Mr. Jeff Rolka, what do you think of throat singing? I've watched videos from Tuva, Mongolia, and Nunavut, and really I'm used to karaoke covering Jeff Buckley a little with falsetto. But I started doing the other to relax. Hope you are well. I like your channel. Thank you. I'm glad you like the channel. I think the Tuvan throat singing is really cool. There was an artist, his first name was Seth, and I don't remember his surname. But he was a singer-songwriter here in the Bay Area of California near San Francisco. And he was on a small indie label, and he used to weave the Tuvan throat singing into his singer-songwriter styled songs, and it was really cool. I'm sure you can find him. And if I can hunt down a video or something like that, I'll pop it in the description of this video. But Seth was his first name. And I think it's really cool. It's not something personally that I'm pursuing in my vocal practice. I'm working on other stuff. But I think that if you're enjoying it, more power to you. Carry on. I have a weak head voice. Want some advice? And my voice gets tired after singing like 6 songs. Is that normal? Unfortunately, I think it is too normal, and it's typically indicative of too much vocal fold engagement. Evaluate the balance of vocal fold engagement and subglottic air pressure, airflow, engagement, quote-unquote support, for the most common way of referring to it that I don't like to use too much. Evaluate that balance, and that can help you basically with everything that you're asking about in that question. Balancing out the voice through the zona di passaggio and above the secondo passaggio will greatly enhance the balance and the strength of that area of your voice. It should also help with the fatigue that you're reporting. Exercises specifically about balance are typically using shorter vowel syllables, and then depending on your skill level, we'll either have a long melismatic phrase afterwards, or you'll just move on to the next key area. So if you're new to these exercises, he, he, nice short vowel syllables. If you are more experienced in them and you've done them in the past, he, he. In that, the idea is to set it up and then sustain it. So that's what I would recommend to work on that. How can you improve on singing high notes quietly for softer songs? Any exercises you'd recommend? That's a really good question. For starters, I would approach this from the standpoint of establishing the high note, whatever that high note is, in as balanced a capacity as possible. So if you are singing a note or singing a phrase and it ends on a high pitch, make sure that you can establish that pitch successfully with good tone quality and good intonation at a comfortable volume. From there, work on the phrase either with the lyrics or with a solid vowel sound, or in isolation of only the interval. So like if the phrase has something to the effect of something to that effect, just working off my cuff here, then you can work with that phrase without the lyrics, without the specific vowels, to establish good tone quality and good intonation on the pitch that you're trying to achieve. Then start practicing attenuating the volume of it. Depending on how much attenuation you need, you will likely achieve the desired results by first either, and this is somewhat paradoxical, increasing your engagement, so increasing the amount that you are lifting muscularly in order to decrease the volume. So you have to attenuate the flow of air. You have to hold back on the flow of air while increasing the engagement of those core body muscles. And that can let you bring the volume down without losing your tone quality, without losing your intonation. So you'll stay in tune, you'll also have good tone. If you still need to sing more softly, then depending on the range of the high note, you may consider altering the balance of your voice so that it is perhaps less voce piena in testa and more cricothyroid dominant. That can greatly help to keep the intonation proper and keep the tone quality quite similar and yet give you the dynamic contrast that you're looking for. Hi Jeff, the quality of my voice changes when I enunciate. So if the song is very open and lyrical, it sounds great. And then when the words go in, I don't sound good at all. It sounds flat. What is happening? What should I try? What is happening? Consonants disrupt the flow of air over the vocal fold. So, When you're doing the nice lyrical phrases, maybe they're melismatic, and you got vowels, and you're just connecting vowel to vowel to vowel to vowel, that flow of air remains largely uninterrupted, and the tone quality and intonation of your voice remains consistent. And by your comment, good, and that's great. For highly syllabic phrases or phrases with lots and lots of consonants, we have to learn to phrase through those consonants. There's a lot of games that we can play in order to achieve that. Now, first and foremost, if you have a phrase that just has a ton of different vowels and a ton of different syllables, then first of all, you might just practice that phrase with a solid vowel sound to make sure that the continuity of your airflow in general is good. If that's fine, then replace the solid vowel with the vowels from your lyrics. This can be a little tricky at first. With practice, it gets easier and easier, like many things. Stick with it. It can be frustrating. It is very, very worthwhile. Listen carefully to the flow of vowels, and if you have inconsistencies, address them before you put the consonants back in. When you've gotten that nice line and all those different vowel sounds working, then put the consonants back in, but play a game with yourself. Try putting in just 10% of the consonants. Not 10% of them, but 10% of the sort of intensity of the consonants. So it probably might sound like you're slurring your speech. You know, like let it be like that for a moment. And then try 20% and try 30%. And then see what it's like when you're singing it the way that you would normally sing it. Different genres require perhaps a little bit more enunciation than others. So if you're doing like spoken word poetry, then the intensity of your consonants probably needs to be fairly high. Yet hopefully the melodies that you have are such that they can bear that level of disruption to the column of air. If you were singing a vocalese where there are no consonants at all, well, that's exactly the opposite, and you have much greater freedom of melodic choices and things like that. Bottom line, we want to try to sing through the consonants as much as possible. With those practices that I delineated, you can find a nice balancing point where you're getting good phonation, good singing, and enough enunciation so that you're being understood. How many days per week should I keep doing the exercises? Because I know that I don't have time later. This is just a hobby. Kind of depends on what you want for your voice. If you're getting the results that you want right now, then you might be good. And there's no need to necessarily press it any further. You've indicated it's just a hobby. Well, that's cool. Some people have hobbies and it's casual and they're not particularly invested in it. If that's where you're at, then you got to make that call. If you're happy with your voice and you're happy with where it's at, then cool, carry on. If you're looking for more, if you want more abilities and things like that, well, then you might have to invest more time in your hobby. It can still be a hobby, but you might have to spend more time doing it. For vocalists that want to show significant progress in their voices, I recommend vocalizing not less than 5 days a week. If you're getting sick or something like that, you're going to have to take time off. You can probably hear my voice is not all that great. I have a pretty nasty cold right now. So, I'm taking a little bit of time off. That's why you're not hearing me demonstrate much stuff in this community questions. But yeah, not less than 5 days a week, and you'll see particularly good progress in general. That includes the repertoire that you might be singing. So if you've allocated half an hour, 45 minutes for your singing practice on a given day, 10, 15 minutes of vocalization, the remainder being done with repertoire. Hey Jeff. A few months ago, I started singing while keeping my larynx down, and I have been progressing really well with singing and keeping it in a neutral position, and now I'm up to D5. Yet, I still have trouble sustaining notes, and sometimes it feels like all I can do is slide up to a note to sing it. Or if I don't slide up and I just singing the note, it feels like part of my throat is closed and the note doesn't fully come out. And I don't like that. Is there any advice you can give me or any exercises that you have that would help me with these problems? Thank you. Love your videos. Keep it up. Okay, well, thank you very much for your kind words. I truly appreciate it. So, I don't know anything about you except for what you've written here that I am aware of. I don't recognize your user ID. So, I don't know if you're a male or female or non-binary. Like, I don't know any of those things. And D5 is just a place on a keyboard. And that means dramatically different things to different people. For me, it means one thing. For a soprano, it means another. For a mezzo-soprano, it means something different still. But by your description, it sounds as if there is a gap in how you are approaching this particular register of your voice. It does not sound to me as if you are adequately anticipating the amount of abdominal muscular engagement and the required airflow for that tessitura of your voice. Hence why you're feeling like your throat is closing off. It's quite likely that either the larynx is shifting ever so slightly and constricting the flow of air. It could also be that the D5 is getting a little bit too much thyroarytenoid dominance, and that's what's giving you that feeling of the throat closing. In either case, approaching it from the top down could be very, very helpful. And you might try exercises like the lip trill, because the lip trill takes a little bit of the weight of the air column off of the vocal folds, and that makes it easier for them to change shape and get the pitches that you're trying to do. You also mentioned trouble with sustaining it, I think. Where was that? Sustaining notes. Similar to the very first response I gave in this video, I would not approach singing at the outside edge of your range with sustained pitches just yet. Not until that note is consistently being established in more legato, sustained in terms of the tempo. So like I went over that Rossini scale. Those kinds of exercises are moving from pitch to pitch to pitch. The reason why is because if we're trying to sustain a note at these registers and we haven't yet really established our technique to sing those pitches effectively, then we can go to the pitch. Even if we achieve it successfully, we can quickly revert back to old habits or release too much engagement or too much airflow and start to clench around that note and reinforce habits that are not going to make us effective on those pitches. So work first with moving note exercises, work towards sustained exercises. Hi, I was wondering if you could give us easy songs to practice for us beginners, something between high baritone and tenor. Sure. Happy to. I don't know if you meant in the context of Community Questions 8 or in general on the channel. It's an interesting idea. I think I did some of those way back, but I quickly ran out of public domain songs that I thought were familiar enough to do it. But I'll take a look at those again, and maybe I can get them in there. Thing is, though, keep in mind, you can always transpose a song so that it's in a comfortable range for you. The song doesn't have to be written in a key that is comfortable for you to sing in, for it to be put into a key that is comfortable for you to sing in. And I realize that transposition can be a little tricky until you get used to it. I've done several videos on that. I would say have a look at those, check them out, see if they're helpful. it's a useful skill for us to acquire if you have not yet done so. And it opens the door to so much more repertoire that otherwise you just wouldn't be able to touch. So yeah, a little bit of transposing, a little bit of melodies that are not too wide in their overall range. Very, very cool request. Happy to oblige. Oops. Hi Jeff, I was wondering why my left ear clogged while doing one of your warm-up exercises. It was clogged while I was in the top of my range during the exercise. When I got down again, my ear came back to normal. Laughing out loud. An experience, haha. Love your videos, I'm from Venezuela. The short answer to that is I have no idea really why that might have happened. It's possible that the air pressure that you were creating while vocalizing was creating enough internal pressure inside the soft tissues of your oral cavity that it made the ear kind of go. And then once you came down and the subglottic air pressure began to abate, it came undone. That would be the most likely explanation, but I don't really know why that might have occurred for you. That being said, I've certainly had my ears pop before when I've been singing, but not with enough regularity to really be able to identify why that occurred. You might just keep a track of it, and if it really, really bugs you, maybe go see an ENT if you can. I've been learning how to belt, but can't seem to go above C5 when my normal vocal range goes to F5. Do you have any tips or exercises to belt higher? So, the word belt, from the school of thought that I come from, means to restrict the ability of the vocal fold to elongate such that the thyroarytenoid muscles are kept the dominant musculature that's controlling the vocal fold mass. Now, I don't, without knowing your voice and knowing the location of the secondo passaggio and other things like that, it may be that F5 is still not above your secondo passaggio, in which case then, technically speaking, you're only kind of belting if you're going to F5. Now, you say that you can't belt above C5, but I question what it is you mean by belt. There are those, I've only heard one person articulate it this way, and they have advocated for elongating the vocal fold as you ascend and then you're belting. But that's somewhere in between. That's not exactly belting, and yet it's also not necessarily preparing for a good transition over the secondo passaggio. And furthermore, C5 is, of course, a perfect fourth below F5. Assuming, let's just say for the sake of argument, that E flat 5 is the location of your secondo passaggio. Just for the sake of argument. And you're singing up to F5 effectively, which would assume that you're making the transition over the secondo passaggio. So beginning around C5, you're then allowing the vocal fold to begin to elongate. You are in the zona di passaggio there, or the upper mid-range of your voice for a mezzo. And as that transition of power from thyroarytenoid dominance to cricothyroid dominance is conducted, you then arrive at F5 with a nice balanced tone quality, having successfully, smoothly navigated over the secondo passaggio. In order to undo that, the easiest way is to increase breath energy and overall force on the vocal fold while you approach F5. That can prohibit the cricothyroid muscles from elongating the vocal fold, and then you'd be creating more of a belted tone. But technically speaking, belting is when we only really begin to belt once we're over the secondo passaggio. And so since it would only be up to F5. Only once you exceeded E flat 5 would you then be belting. I mean, in this example that I've delineated, that would be okay. But beyond that, the sort of technique around belting is a bit spurious, if you would forgive me. It's basically, if you want to belt, you need to increase breath energy such that the thyroarytenoid muscles continue to be the dominant phonating factor on the vocal fold. It is a self-limiting technique. In other words, that mass in that configuration will only vibrate so quickly without any elongation. Once you begin the process of elongation, then you're doing something other than, strictly speaking, belting, in my opinion. Whether or not you choose to make a good transition over the secondo passaggio is another matter entirely, but that's something different. So increase breath energy, do it in small increments. So you might do it by, not do the exercise in half steps, maybe try 1 octave arpeggios. With a solid vowel sound. Just go up by semitone, come back down by semitone, test the waters, assess your vocal fatigue, assess if it's working or not, and try that out. I would suggest an A or an Ah vowel to start with, unless that's skating off the vocal fold entirely. I was scoring a Mariah Carey song, Oh Holy Night, and my teacher told me about whistle register because I was struggling with it. Please, can you help in the area? I'm just getting to know about it. Thanks. Kind of talked about that at the very beginning of the video. I would say go back and check that out. Cultivate, release, work on your oral skills, and that will help you a little bit. Probably the most interesting thing about whistle register is that it is a really fundamentally different usage of the vocal fold, where it's sort of capping the epiglottis, and it's literally forming like a whistle, like a recorder. And it's a very different way of using the voice. Morning. In your teaching, have you come across the concepts or terms the one point or flipping the voice? I find them in vocal literature about tenors especially. So this question's in multiple parts, so let me read the whole question. Do you recommend multiple sessions, 20 minutes or so? Daily practice sessions or regular, more extensive ones, more than an hour? Finally, I know, sorry, totally fine. Any comments on the advice along the lines of, it's all lower than you think, pitch-wise, or sing down on or to the notes, not up to them, or think down when you sing high notes? I always thought it was a way to avoid tensing the throat or raising the larynx while ascending, but would appreciate your thoughts. Thank you and best wishes. Thank you very much. I happen to recognize this user ID. It's nice to hear from you again. So, first and foremost, yes, not the one point, but flipping the voice. I've heard that used, or similar concepts to it. Generally speaking, that gets used in talking about technique around the secondo passaggio. I'm speculating a little bit here. I generally think that those types of directions are done in order to help people who can't quite get over the secondo passaggio. And so, and when you haven't developed a smooth transition over the secondo passaggio, it can feel like there's an obstruction or like there's a block. I mean, it gets called the break, right? And kind of like that flipping over can sometimes be an evocative image that helps people do that. I approach it differently. Like if you look at the How to Sing High Notes videos, parts 1, 2, and 3, I take a really different approach to teaching people how to access the upper range of their voice. That being said, I've certainly evoked similar kinds of images and concepts for folks who really struggled with getting across the secondo passaggio initially. Though again, fundamentally, I approach it from the top down. I don't start below and then go up to it. The reasons for which are in those videos, so you can have a look at that if you like. Do I recommend multiple sessions, 20 minutes or so, daily practice sessions, or regular, more extensive practice? Kind of depends on the needs of the vocalist in question. If I have like a performance, a recording session, or a gig in the evening, I can very quickly end up doing multiple practice sessions. I might do my normal vocalizations earlier on in the day and then need to do more vocalizations in the evening in order to be warmed up and ready to go for my performance or session or whatever it happens to be. When you start talking about sessions in excess of an hour, a kind of red flag in my mind goes off out of concern that that's like the weekly session instead of a daily session. Daily, shorter practice periods are far, far better than one massive session once per week. Then again, if that's all you've got, then that's better than nothing to do that one major session. So consider carefully the needs of the vocalist, consider your needs, and then act accordingly. Regular daily practice would be best. 15 to 20 minutes of vocalization in addition to whatever else you have to sing repertoire-wise. So if you've got 45 minutes, 15 to 20 a warm-up, vocalizations, working on technical stuff, the rest on your repertoire. And finally, so I agree with you. I think that those instructions are typically given to vocalists to try to avoid lifting the larynx up to the note in question. This can also be done, I think, or perhaps I should say, I have sometimes suggested such things to vocalists in an effort to get them to physically anticipate the energy, the airflow and body muscular energy required to effectively sing the note in question. So when you've got, if you're new to singing in the zona de passaggio or you're new to singing above the secondo passaggio, anticipating the amount of airflow and physical body engagement required to successfully sing those pitches, it has not yet been established. You haven't been doing it long enough to be able to innately anticipate what is required. So by asking the vocalist to think down onto the pitch or to think above and descend down onto it, in my practice, I'm trying to get them to engage more in advance so that when they do arrive at the pitch, they've got adequate airflow and engagement to successfully sing the pitch. There can be an aural skills component in this as well. Generally speaking, ear training and aural skills is most easily done in the speaking range of your voice. As you begin to go outside of that range, that can be a little trickier. And so by trying to think higher, I don't know that thinking about overshooting it is really all that objectively helpful. But subjectively, in other words, from one vocalist to the next, you may find that suggesting such things gets the desired result. And it's important, I think, also to note at this point that a lot of times those kinds of directions are very subjective to the vocalist in question. So while one vocalist may respond very favorably to, I want you to think as if you're coming from above that pitch down onto it, another one may not respond to that very well at all, and you may need to find a different kind of direction. But in general, I think those directions are given for those reasons. Hi, I'm 16, but my voice seems to still be changing, and so it gets harder to sing because things that used to work don't anymore. I can't really make my voice sound bright unless I belt, and I don't like that. Any advice? Hang in there. I'm sorry, but you just gotta hang in there. It's gonna be a bit. It's gonna be a little bit of time until things settle down. I would caution you against going for what I would call form over substance. Don't belt just because it gives you a short fix on brightness. stick to the comfortable range of your voice until your voice begins to settle down more, or just, do minor forays into that upper register just to kind of check in and keep things loose. Work on your overall engagement, on your posture, your concept of vowels. Read music if you don't yet, or learn to read music. Learn some music theory. All of those things will serve you long after your voice has settled down. And once your voice has settled down and your registration event technique can begin to be practiced, all of those skills that you will have then acquired will serve you remarkably well and really put you well ahead of those who kind of belt their way through just to get that brightness in their voice right now. So hang in there, hang in there. I have to say I was a bit of a late bloomer myself in that regard. My voice kind of but I guess it also didn't change all that much, quite frankly. But it did kind of happen a little bit later on, and it can be frustrating, but just hang in there. It'll settle down, and once it settles down, having acquired those other skills, you will really, really be ahead of the game. Okay, you got a long time to sing. You got a long, long time to sing. Keeping in mind that most, especially if your voice ended up being like particularly lower, the full breadth of your voice may not develop fully until you're well into your 30s or 40s. It's not to say you cannot sing very effectively and professionally far earlier on, but you've got a long career ahead of you. Hi, I'm a top soprano with quite a low range. I do your bottom alto and top soprano exercises. I'm sure there are more women like me that might appreciate a full warm-up from bottom alto to top soprano. Thank you. You got it, not a problem. I've only done a couple of those, and I'll happily do some more. Totally fine, totally fine. Thank you for reminding me that those are desirable out there in YouTube land. Happy to accommodate you. Thanks so much for all you do, Jeff. You're welcome. I am always inspired by your teachings. Thank you. Could you talk a bit about releasing the breath? I have been working a lot lately on keeping the ribs expanded and the abs engaged during exhalation, but specifically when I have passages where I need to take a quick breath, and that's in quotes, I don't feel like I'm fully releasing all of the air I had in the previous phrase so that I can begin a new phrase with a fresh, low breath. It right now is at this high, shallow place. Thanks. Okay, so this user ID I happen to recognize. My first thing that I would suggest is, because if last I interacted with this particular person, they were in music school, so you might talk to your teacher first and foremost. See what they have to say and bring this concern up to them, because they might be able to help you. Now, I think there's a delicate balance here, because, and there's a couple key words here that give me a little bit of pause. The sensation of low breath gives me a little bit of concern that there's a lot of distension of the lower abdominal area. That's not a particularly effective means by which to support the singing voice. So I would very much investigate how that's being utilized and what level of effectiveness of the overall expansion and engagement of the system you're achieving. I'm wondering about the quick breaths in quotations too. With good apagio breath management, the breath happens almost reflexively. So I don't really, like when I'm taking a breath, I don't really think about taking a quick breath. It happens basically before I really have given it much conscious thought. It's that kind of reflexive activity of maintaining that expanded position and maintaining the diaphragm in its lowered position such that it's interacting with the core body muscles and creating that subglottic air pressure. Now, I can, however, sympathize with feeling like I've done this great succession of long phrases Or usually when this happens is when there's been a successive short phrases where I've taken really short breaths to top up my air column. And I haven't been able to expel all of the stale air in my lungs for some period of time. For me, that it takes a little bit of time to get there. Yet when it's time, it's really, really time. You have to be strategic about this. Sometimes it can be advantageous to sing two successive phrases contiguously rather than taking the short top-up breath. This can only be done, however, if you're going to stay above 20% in reserve. So if the two phrases together mean that you're going to dip too low, you're going to expel too much air from your lungs, then you need to find a different strategy. Because once we get below 20%, the whole system tends to collapse and we lose the engagement and we lose like the real effective ability to phonate properly. So you got to be really, really strategic. Look for the spots in the repertoire that you're singing where you can either disengage momentarily, allow the system to relax, recycle the air, get re-expanded and engaged, and then get back into the piece. If no such places exist where it's very clear that that can be done, then stringing a couple phrases together such that you exhaust more of what you're carrying in reserve, with, again, ideally without dipping below that 20% in reserve. At that point, you'll have exhausted nearly, most, or hopefully most, of what you've got in the lungs, and then you can just quickly exhale and then re-engage such that you get your nice full complement of air and then carry on with the next phrase. That I think is going to be really, really specific to the repertoire. In vocalizations, I wouldn't expect that to occur. If it's occurring in your vocalizations, then just evaluate the system is the best advice that I can give, or evaluate it in conjunction with your teacher. See if there are gaps in there, or if something is going on that is as yet unknown. I do hope that helps. Thank you all so much for your questions. I really appreciate it. My name's Jeff. Take really good care of your voices. Keep singing. Hopefully we'll see you again. Bye.